Towards the end of our program, I would love to present an exclusive interview for NTV from WUF13 that includes the discussions of our guest speaker, Mr. Orhan Amasha from N News, and reporter Meryem Bababayli. Here are the key details.
Firstly, please introduce yourself and your purpose of visit here in the forum. I know you're a media member, but your overall expectations at the end of this forum. I mean, for the sake of region and for the sake of the world, you know, at the global level. And what you want to share with our viewers, whatever you want.
Well, thank you very much indeed for this kind question. My name is Orhan Amasha. I'm Deputy Editor-in-Chief of A News TV station, which is an English language TV station based here in Baku, broadcasting to 110 countries. I'm attending this particular congregation as a member of the media. So basically, I'm here to cover and analyze this very important 13th edition of the World Urban Forum, which is an important occasion not just for our country, but also for the entire region. Unlike COP29, we're not expecting any legally binding framework document. It's a different kind of occasion, but it's very natural that at a time when we have 3 billion people around the world are lacking access to the housing, the proper housing, and 1.1 billion people actually living in informal settlements, and 300 million people actually suffering from homelessness. I think it's very good, it's absolutely vital that we come together, different parts of the world, different countries, heads of government, different stakeholders, and contemplate the possibility of sorting out this problem by means of joint action. The fact that it's taken in Azerbaijan is not accidental, because decision regarding this very event taking place here was actually taken back in December. And it's very important to note that, and I mentioned this when I was being interviewed by your colleague just yesterday, when Azerbaijan sorted out its territorial integrity problem back in September 2023, then the process, bilateral process between Azerbaijan and Armenia started. And the reason why COP29 was held here in Baku back in November 2024, and the reason why WUF13 is taking place here in May 2026, all of the things thanks to the Azerbaijani-Armenian cooperation. And therefore, there's a connection between Azerbaijan sorting out its problem, setting out agenda, changing facts on the ground, and these two massive congregations taking place in Azerbaijan. Will it produce a certain impact, changing the way things are being conducted now? Not perhaps immediately. This is not a congregation which is to produce a definable framework-based document, but it has to lay the ground for further solution, and I'm very confident that will happen.
If you take some attention on the procedures, I mean, during that kind of process, in COP29, also at this period, some anti-companies start against Azerbaijan. It's like, how to put in some words, like some powers are jealous. What can you say on that? Is it something natural, or is it something done on purpose?
Well, there are those countries, there are those actors around the world which do not like Azerbaijan. Perhaps they are not bound to like Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is not desirous of being liked by everybody. But the reality is that when a massive event is taking place in a country, the country happens to be the cynosure of the world's attention. It's a good opportunity for the country itself to show its own qualities, its own beauty, in the same way as COP29 was a distinct opportunity for Azerbaijan to show Azerbaijan's different aspects. WUF13 is a distinct opportunity to show that Baku is a fantastic city, multi-dimensional city, with White City being inside a city, the sea breeze being another aspect. It's an absolutely fantastic opportunity for Azerbaijan to show the rebuilding efforts in the deoccupied territories. In the same manner, in the same way as it is very important for Azerbaijan to show its own qualities, those countries, actors which have bias towards Azerbaijan, there are many of those in different parts of the world, in Russia, Europe and the United States, for them it's a distinct opportunity to actually disparage Azerbaijan. So it's very natural.
So it's kind of Azerbaijan's success in hosting those kinds of events brings that jealousy.
In a sense, yes, it brings. And also, it's not just simply about Azerbaijan's success. It's also about the natural tendency of this country. We remember what happened back in COP29. There was a massive attack against Azerbaijan. They wanted to make sure COP29 does not achieve any success, but they failed miserably in many ways, because COP29 was one of the greatest successes in the history of their congregation, UN Climate Conference. I was in Brazil last year in November. If you compare organizational aspects of that COP30 with the COP29 in Azerbaijan, you would have seen Azerbaijan, but there was no sort of universal recognition for that, perhaps, but there was a distinct realization that that was a massive success. So I'm not at all surprised. I think what is very, very characteristic of Azerbaijan as a nation at this very juncture, you're not supposed to be liked by everybody. You're not even you should not be in a position of trying to prove to everybody that you're excellent. You have to do your job properly, and the recognition will come as a natural consequence of what you're doing.
You've mentioned about the organizational side of this. What about the negotiations? I mean, the outcome, the result, the practical results of the process. I mean, compared to Brazil, compared to everything, Azerbaijan was pretty much successful, they say. I mean, I'm talking about COP29.
Well, COP29 is a massive success. We remember what happened on day one. There was a progress on Article 6.2 and 4, the market decision regarding formulating, establishing that market was achieved. There was a progress with regards to the loss and damage fund. By the end of the conference, of course, there was an important consequential decision on NCQG, climate finance goal. But that was about COP29. Here at WUF13, we're not expecting NCQG-style decisions because the nature of the process here is different.
Last two questions. I mean, do you think that the reconstruction procedures in Karabakh, in Zangezur region, I mean, are they kind of example for the other countries? I mean, Azerbaijan's experience, do you think that it's valuable? Can we do it? I mean, are we able to do that?
Certainly we're doing it, and everybody is seeing how we're doing it. What Azerbaijan is doing in Karabakh, in the Karabakh Economic Region, and also East Zangezur region since late 2020 and since September 2023, when Azerbaijan fully recovered its territorial integrity by regaining control of the rest of Karabakh. All of this process cumulatively showed to the world how to recover, rebuild and restore. So what you're doing in Karabakh is mentally a very difficult process in a sense, because certain sections of Karabakh were razed to the ground, and Azerbaijani authorities, relevant authorities, are building from scratch. So when you're building from scratch, you're facing a challenge of a particular nature, because it was razed to the ground. You're not really replicating what was there, but also what you're doing, you're replicating what would have been there had there been no destruction at all, because you are replicating pre-existing elements. You're recreating something which should have been there had there been no destruction at all. And also, of course, Karabakh Economic Region and Zangezur, East Zangezur, should not be deemed as a large museum for people just frolic around and see for themselves. Those areas should be habitable and livable. So therefore, bearing in mind the financial exigencies, you have to put into practice AI-induced, climate-conscious, water-sensitive, future-oriented, nature-based solutions. That is what Azerbaijan has been doing. And I think that here, within the confines of this particular congregation, there has been very strong recognition of what Azerbaijan has been doing.
I kind of noticed that there are lots of representatives from developing nations in this one more compared to COP29. I mean, developing nations, maybe when I ask about it, they say that they came for help, you know. Developed nations representatives are less in WUF compared to COP29.
I haven't noticed that, to be honest with you. Maybe your observation is grounded on what you have seen. I think that both developing and developed countries are present. During COP29, there was a strong geopolitical momentum. There was a gap between global north and global south. Global south countries, developing countries, needed financial support from developed countries, which do have a historic responsibility towards developing countries. Here, of course, we discuss finance and financial matters, but we don't expect a financial decision. And financial decision in the context of COP29 was about actually developed countries helping developing ones, and there was a sense of historic responsibility. That particular historic responsibility is not really relevant to this particular WUF in the way that it was relevant to COP29. But of course, there are people from all walks of life. They are urbanists. There are heads of government and state, different stakeholders, because the question there is that by 2050, the cities around the world will need to absorb around 2 billion people, additional 2 billion people. And cities should be livable and habitable. Their ecosystem should contain all the necessary elements. And the question there is that, could we actually formulate a joint action? Could there be anything, an example of London, for example, the 40% of which is actually green, that could be applied in this part of the world? And this should be sort of exchange. There are a number of things that the world can learn from Azerbaijan. Baku is a very good example of that. And and I think that in that particular case, it should be seen as a confluence of developed and developing countries coming together, as opposed to this entire story being based on the fate of the cities in the developing part of the world. But I also fully acknowledge that there have been specific emphasis on the Global South. In fact, Global South NGO platform was established here, and we know that there are specific challenges connected with Global South. So we could see the element of dichotomy there, but I would be in favor of seeing the world at large as one sort of a large, harmonious sort of a system, and focus on the joint practice and also exchange of views.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You too.